Please, she's not waking up. Somebody help! The panicked scream of young Luca Rossi echoed through the marble grand hall of Orion Biotech, causing all the remaining guests from the gala to turn around at once. Crystal chandeliers cast light upon the tear-stained face of the 8-year-old child, his hair messy, his dress shirt rumpled. But Luca looked at no one. Nor did he wait for anyone to come running. He darted through the rows of seats, his dusty sneakers sliding slightly on the polished floor. Behind him, the woman who looked like a stepmother, Nora, ran after him, her hands trembling so much she couldn't even dial her phone. An event staffer gasped. "What's happening? Has anyone called security?" No one had an answer. Luca ran straight toward only one person, a woman in her 40s, clearing away security barriers, a security jacket draped loosely over her arm. "Miss Maria, my dad. My dad fell in the basement. His head is bleeding. He won't open his eyes." Maria Torres stood frozen. Her dark brown eyes flashed with something not fear, but something like a long-locked instinct suddenly snapping awake. She crouched down to Luca's level, placing both hands on the boy's shoulders. "Take me there. Now, no further questions, no need for explanations." Luca gripped her hand tight, pulling her along at a speed that nearly made him stumble. Maria ran after him, her body shifting from the weary posture of a long shift to a focus that was almost cold. The pair, a night shift security guard and a panicked child, cut through the lavish hall, where a few guests were still raising champagne glasses. Everyone turned their heads, but no one was fast enough to react. Another security guard ran after them. "Maria, what's happening?" Maria just threw back a sentence, her voice gritty but clear. "Call an ambulance. Delivery basement. One unconscious male, head trauma." She didn't slow down, not even for a step. Footsteps pounded against the grand hall, interlaced with the sound of gala music still playing halfway through. The staff stood frozen, some clutching their chests as if the reality of the building suddenly became too real. Luca stood trembling before the elevator control panel, his finger repeatedly slamming the B1 button. The doors opened. The boy pulled Maria inside, his voice breaking in waves, his breath so rapid it choked him. "Dad." Dad was pushed down, and he won't get up. "Miss, hurry, hurry." Maria bent down, placing a hand on Luca's back to reassure him. But her gaze was as sharp as a scalpel, a look no longer found in an ordinary security guard. "Listen to me, Luca. Your dad needs us to be calm." "I am here now." The steel doors slid shut, the yellow light reflecting on Mariah's cold but absolutely focused face. The elevator chimed ding, the doors opening to the dark, cold basement. Luca dashed out first. Maria followed close behind, and just a few steps further the dark truth awaited them in silence. The basement of Orion Biotech was always colder than the rest of the building. A cold not from air conditioning, but from the pale, white, fluorescent lights hanging from the concrete ceiling, making everything look stuck between evening and an abandoned laboratory. And it was exactly there, 40 minutes earlier, that Dr. Daniel Rossi had clutched his coat tight to his chest, trying to fight the strange chill coating his skin. He had just stepped off the elevator, carrying a briefcase containing the only raw data proving OX-17, the drug the company was about to mass test could cause severe liver damage in the most vulnerable patient groups, something the board had tried to sink like a heavy stone. Daniel sighed, checking his email on his phone one more time, as if hoping what he knew wasn't the truth. But the truth is always cold, cold like the concrete floor beneath his feet. Daniel walked to the delivery area, a place with only the sound of ventilation fans and cardboard boxes stacked like temporary walls. He was fishing for his car keys when he heard footsteps behind him. "Dr. Rossi?" A man's voice, deep, strangely calm. Daniel straightened up and turned around. Two strangers stood a few meters away, the overhead light, casting shadows over their faces. No protective coats, no employee badges, but their gaze was too alert. "You have what we need," one of them said. "Hand over the hard drive." "Well, leave immediately." Daniel gripped the briefcase tighter. "You don't know what it is. That drug isn't saw." Before he could finish the sentence, the hand of one of the men grabbed his collar violently, dragging him sideways like tossing a shadow. Daniel's back slammed into the edge of a crate. Then a forceful shove sent his head crashing down onto the concrete floor. A small crack sound that only those who have witnessed injury would recognize as dangerous. His vision began to blur. Sound felt like someone had turned down the volume. Two figures ransacked the briefcase, snatched the laptop and hard drive, then vanished through the emergency exit. Daniel tried to stretch his hand toward the path they fled, but his arm curled back midway, drained of strength. After that, there was only silence, quiet enough that the wind from the ventilation fan sounded like someone whispering. Luca discovers. A small scream in the parking lot. 10 minutes later, the elevator chimed ding, and Luca stepped out first, holding a small robot toy he had bought at the gala souvenir counter. Nora walked behind, on the phone, complaining about Daniel working too late. Luca always ran faster. He turned past a shipping crate and saw his father's shoes. "Dad? Daddy?" In that second, the boy's world seemed to freeze. Daniel lay on his side, blood from the back of his head spreading into a dark stain on the floor. Eyes closed, motionless. Luca dropped the robot. It bounced once, then rolled away, the sound small but terribly echoing in the empty space. The boy screamed a scream that tore through the air, shooting straight up to the basement ceiling like an alarm. Nora took a few seconds to understand what was happening. When she saw Daniel, she collapsed onto one knee, shaking as she called for help. Meanwhile, Luca had already bolted toward the elevator, tears not yet falling from his chin. He knew only one person who could help, Miss Maria. The elevator bell rang open. Luca shot out like a rocket, Maria following close behind. The scene before her made her pause for exactly one heartbeat. Daniel lay motionless, his breath blending into the cold floor. The blood half dried. Nora was huddled, clutching her phone, while the boy stood there, shivering as if he had just run from a nightmare. Maria knelt beside Daniel without saying a word. She placed 2 fingers under his jaw, checking his airway. Another hand gently opened his eye, looking for light reflex. Those movements were clean, precise, the kind only learned when performed thousands of times in places no one wants to step foot in. She whispered, airway partially obstructed, pupils sluggish, signs of severe impact to the back of the head. Luca grabbed her arm. "Miss, is my dad going to die?" Maria placed a hand on his shoulder, not taking her eyes off the victim. "Your dad is fighting, and he isn't fighting alone. Do you hear me?" Maria undid her waist pouch, the kind people thought only held walkie-talkies, zip ties, or protective gloves. But inside, it was not that. Quick clot gauze, compression pads for head trauma, reflex tools, a soft neck brace improvised from a triangular bandage and thick padding. Nora choked out. Where did you learn those things?" Maria didn't answer. She worked like someone who had done this amidst the sound of gunfire. After a few seconds of suffocating tension, she leaned in and spoke softly. "He is still breathing, slow but steady. Now, we must not let him move his neck. You stand here. Hold your dad's hand gently, so he knows you are here." Luca did as told, tears falling onto his father's hand. The sound of sirens echoed from afar. 2 paramedics rushed in, carrying a stretcher. It took them only a second to see the setup around Daniel neck brace, airway, bleeding control. The female EMT spoke up. "Who was the first responder?" Maria stood up. She wiped blood from her hands with a cloth, speaking simply. "Me." The EMT looked at her, at the security uniform, then back at Daniel. These techniques are not from someone who only learned basic first aid. Maria did not reply. They moved Daniel onto the stretcher. Luca clung tightly to his dad's shirt. Nora picked the boy up into the vehicle, trying to reassure him, but her voice was trembling so much no one could hear clearly. The ambulance doors slammed shut, the siren cutting through the entire basement. Maria stood back alone, amidst the returning silence. A drop of dried blood on her hand, a long breath she had held in her chest for too long. Daniel wakes up. A child's voice is the first thing he hears. The blinding white light from the recovery room ceiling made Daniel blink several times. The first sound he heard was not the monitor, but Luca's voice, small as a breath. "Dad." You opened your eyes. Daniel wanted to nod, but at the slightest effort, a sharp pain shot up the back of his neck. Nora stood nearby, her face haggard from shock and sleeplessness. A doctor on duty walked in, voice calm. "You suffered moderate head trauma, slight internal bleeding, but it's controlled. And there is something you need to know. The person who gave you first aid did it very correctly. Very timely." Daniel squinted. "Did the ambulance arrive fast?" The doctor shook his head. "No. Before we arrived, a security guard handled everything. Someone who was professionally trained. Detective Irene appears. Every question weighs like a stone on the chest. 3 hours later, the door swung open. A woman in a gray suit walked in, wearing a badge. Detective Irene Cho. Her voice was concise, firm, no beating around the bush. "Dr. Rossi, we need you to recount everything before short-term memory loss sets in." Daniel recounted the shadowy figures. The words about the hard drive, the blow to the head, the spinning lights. Irene asked the most important question. "Who do you think is behind this?" Daniel remained silent for so long the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he said, "Victor Lang, Director of Research. He wanted me to alter the OX-17 trial data. I refused." Irene took notes, her eyes unsurprised as if she had guessed it beforehand. Maria's past revealed. Not just a night shift guard. That afternoon, Irene went to find Maria at the security guard post. She rolled Maria's fingerprints onto the witness form. The scanning system flashed red in less than 2 seconds. Irene looked at the screen, then at Maria. "Dr. Torres, it's been a long time since I've seen your file." Maria's facial muscles twitched slightly. She didn't deny it. Irene read slowly. "Surgeon. Trauma medicine. Peacekeeping force. Active in Zidane Valley. Middle East. Left the service after a field hospital explosion. Heavy casualties." The file didn't give details, but Irene knew. The blurred-out sections of a file are always the most painful parts. Maria said only one sentence. "But all of that couldn't save my daughter." Daniel and Maria meet again, a thank you unspoken. When Maria walked into the hospital room, Luca immediately rushed over, hugging her leg tight as if she were the only safe person in the world. Daniel lay in bed, head still bandaged, voice hoarse. "I owe you my life." Maria shook her head. "I just did what I used to do, before life told me to stop." Daniel looked into her eyes. Those were not the eyes of a security guard, but of someone who had seen too many people die under their hands and was still afraid to add another name to that list. 3 days of investigation. The truth revealed like cracks in glass. 3 days passed. Irene and the investigation team tracked it down. Basement cameras. 2 hooded figures entering at the exact time Daniel was attacked. Burner phone data. A chain of calls linked to a transport company set up by Victor Lang under another name. Deleted internal emails. Pressures demanding Daniel to adjust figures to fit the plan. Each piece was a twist, making the picture clearer. Victor Lang had bet his career and others' lives on an unverified drug. Daniel walks into the meeting room, not with strength, but with truth. On the fourth day, Orion Biotech held an emergency meeting. 7 board members sat straight-backed around a 5-meter walnut table. Through the clear glass, the city below sparkled with lights. Unaware a confrontation was igniting high above. Daniel walked in, still limping, head still bandaged. But his eyes were brighter than ever. He placed a thick file in front of him. Falsified system access logs, real side effect data proof of Victor forcing data changes. Basement camera images. A board member asked quietly, "Are you asserting someone in the company is behind the attack?" Daniel looked straight at Victor. "I don't assert. I only present evidence." Victor drops the mask, the voice feigning power but clearly trembling. Victor shot up, pointing at Daniel. "He just hit his head and is delusional. No one is stupid enough to attack a colleague." But his hand shook, and that made the whole room go silent. Maria enters, eyes that have seen more truth than anyone. The door opened. Maria walked in wearing simple clothes, a small medical bag over her shoulder. No security uniform. No employee badge. People looked at her like someone appearing in the wrong place, but she spoke clearly, without raising her voice. "I am the one who found Dr. Rossi. He did not fall, as Mr. Lang says. It was a push from behind, intentional, forceful, enough to fracture the occipital bone." The room sank into silence. Victor scoffed. "You're a night guard. What do you know about head trauma?" Maria smirked slightly. "I used to operate on bombing victims. I know very well when a person falls, and when their fate was decided by someone else. Tension like a taut wire." Victor loses his cool. Victor walked around the table, approaching Daniel. "You will destroy the company if you say those stupid things. Ox 17 will save hundreds of people." Daniel replied calmly. "No, life is saved by hiding the deaths of others." Victor gritted his teeth, taking another step. Maria immediately stepped up, standing between him and Daniel. Her voice was deep and low. "Don't touch him." Not a threat, not loud, but sharp enough that Victor stepped back half a pace. Door bursts open. Truth enters with handcuffs. The meeting room doors flew open. Detective Irene Cho walked in with 2 investigators from the Drug Administration. Victor Lang. Her voice boomed in the glass room. "You are under arrest for falsifying clinical data, manipulating trials, and direct involvement in the assault on Dr. Rossi." Victor cursed, struggling, but his hands were handcuffed within seconds. As he was led away, he turned back and yelled, "You people don't understand. Without Ox 17, this company will collapse. You will regret destroying your own future." Maria watched him go, voice small but sharp as a scalpel. "The future is not built on the blood of the innocent." Afterward, the question no one in the room dared ask directly. A board member turned to Maria. "Who are you? Really?" Maria looked down at her hands, hands that had saved lives, lost lives, and let go. She replied slowly, "Maria Torres. Trauma surgeon. Currently, night shift security guard for this building." Daniel whispered, loud enough only for her to hear, "No one can hide their calling for that long." Maria didn't answer, but the way her hand tightened on her bag strap showed the words touched the deepest place inside her. After the storm, the first peaceful but painful days, Daniel was transferred to a regular ward 4 days after the arrest. The stitches on the back of his head still stung. His walk was still unsteady, but in his eyes was a relief he hadn't felt in years. He no longer had to run from the truth. As for Maria, she quietly continued working at the security office, but every time she patrolled past the hospital corridor, The neon light reflecting on her face added another layer of contemplation. The meeting in the hospital hallway, an unexpected offer. One afternoon, as the breeze from the hospital window blew the curtains gently, Daniel saw Maria leaning against the wall at the end of the hall, clutching the strap of her small medical bag. He approached on crutches. "Daniel, you still don't want them to know who you are?" Maria, smiling faintly. "For what? Is a doctor who abandoned the profession still worthy of respect?" Daniel looked straight into her eyes. "What about the person who saved me from dying of head trauma? The person who stood between me and Victor in the meeting room? Is that person worthy of respect?" Maria remained silent, but that silence was heavy, like a scar that had closed only to be torn open again. After a while, Daniel said what he had been thinking since waking up. "I want to open a community clinic, where those who can't pay hospital bills still have a chance to live." Maria looked at him, frowning slightly. "You want to open a clinic? With me?" Daniel nodded, without hesitation. "Don't you see, Maria? You're back. That night you saved me, your hands remembered what they were born to do." The final fear Maria had to face, Maria turned her face to the window. Her face reflected on the glass, but behind her were the years she spent running. The field operating room, the explosions, hands covered in the blood of those she couldn't save, and the small image of her daughter, fading amidst the smoke and dust. Maria took a deep breath. Then she turned back, her eyes looking like they had found something long forgotten. "If I step back into that world, I'm not sure I can handle another loss." Daniel replied, "We can't save everyone, but we can save someone, and sometimes that much is enough to keep us standing." Maria bowed her head. A tear fell onto the white floor. Not from pain, but from letting go of fear. 1 year later, the old building reborn. The story shifts fast, like a movie montage. An old warehouse repainted. Cracked glass windows replaced with bright new panes. The walls relined, a sign hung up. Torres Rossi, community clinic, neighbors coming to help paint. Children running around with free orange juice. Luca carefully taping up a drawing. Maria in a white coat, Daniel holding a clipboard. Underneath the neatly written line, "Here, nobody is alone." Then came the opening day. The clinic was small but warm. Simple wooden chairs, a few medicine shelves, instruction boards in 4 languages to serve the area's immigrants. More people came than they expected, tired faces, bodies exhausted by illness with no money for treatment. Maria stepped into her first clinic in many years. Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart was strangely steady. Final scene. Sunset on the clinic roof. Sunset fell over the city, purple and orange hues dyeing the row of old houses. On the roof, Maria stood looking down at the poor streets below, still noisy, still harsh. But today, there was something different. Daniel brought 2 hot coffees over. He handed one to her. "You saved 10 people today, and it's only the first day." Maria smiled softly, a smile Daniel hadn't seen since the day he met her. A door opened behind them. Luca ran up with a new drawing. In the picture, Maria wore a white coat. Daniel stood next to her. And above them there was an image of a little girl with small wings, smiling. "Luca. Miss Maria, I think she is very proud. Because you helped so many people." Maria looked at the drawing for a long time. Her throat tightened, but this time, not from pain. She placed one hand on Daniel's shoulder, the other gently stroking Luca's hair. "There is no way back to how things were. There is only the way forward, a path where every step is guided by what we once lost and what we have just found again." Maria looked at the sky. The sky was no longer as dark as the night she met herself again. A thin but clear ray of light pierced through the clouds, and for the first time in many years, She allowed herself to believe she still had a place in the world of those who save others.
If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to support the channel so we can create more videos. Thank you, everyone.